Going on, guys? Today I basically set up a guide that is going to basically help beginners figure out what their goals are in regards to training, and basically what they should do step by step. What should they do within the first 6 months to a year. So I'm going to go over all the steps, and I hope you guys enjoy it. The first step I would do is just set a goal of what you want to accomplish, right? So whether it's to lose body fat or build muscle or whatever it might be, or you might be in the middle, you might be skinny fat. Whatever it might be, set a goal of what you want to do. So for example, if you're very overweight, perhaps what you want to do is obviously you want to lose that excess body fat. So make that your goal for the next 6 months to a year. Yes, you will be building muscle with bodybuilding split that you're doing, but your main priority is just to get that excess body fat off, just to keep your health in check, ultimately. On the other hand, if you're skinny and you're trying to bulk up, right, your goal is just to build as much muscle as possible, so that eating a lot more and doing bodybuilding training. Yes, you could do cardio, but nothing too crazy. If your goal is to build muscle, you want to keep it low intensity, steady state kind of cardio. Nothing high intensity or nothing within that realm, ultimately, because you're trying to retain as many calories as possible so you can actually optimize it to building muscle. So number one, you obviously, like I said, you want to figure out what your goal is for the next 6 to 12 months. Number two, you want to make sure that you're not looking at this as a sprint, right? If you don't get your results in 2 to 3 weeks, you can't just quit, right? You need to look at this as a marathon, not a sprint. So you need to be in this for the long haul, and make sure you're enjoying the process a little bit, right? Because at least you know with the right plan you're going to make changes to your body, right? If you're putting in the work and the hours and putting in the time in your diet and all this kind of stuff, ultimately you're going to get there. So yes, obviously for some people it might be harder, whereas some people might get it a little bit easier, but just enjoy the process, right? It's a marathon, not a sprint. So keep that in the back of your head and make sure you just tell yourself that constantly, that this is a marathon. Now, the meat and potatoes of this is basically just creating a structured plan in the beginning. So you have to look at this as phases, obviously. You have to look at this as phases. So the first phase I would undergo is learning how to execute the exercises properly. The exercises that you're going to do, you need to learn how to execute them properly. And most importantly, you need to know how to stabilize your body in general, whether that's just going through basic motions or any kind of static balance, whatever it might be. You need to make sure that you're able to stabilize the weight that you're pushing, ultimately. So the ways you could fix that is basically prioritizing some stabilizing training in the beginning, right? So maybe working with some dumbbells, light dumbbells in the beginning, right? You want to progressively get better, right? Lift heavier, whether that's just free weights, whatever it might be. But with the specific stabilizing exercise, you really just want to be able to make sure you could stabilize yourself, ultimately, just to get those stabilizing muscles fired up when you do for the free weight exercises, of course. Another thing you want to do, obviously, is keep your form in check, everything like that. And the thing about form is it comes with repetition. The more you do it, the more natural it is. You don't have to think about it. It's in the back of your head, and you just do it. For example, let's say you do a dumbbell shoulder press, right? The more you do it with the proper form, the easier it's going to get, and the less you're actually going to have to think about it, because you'll already be applying that tension when you're doing it right, ultimately. So just keep that in mind, that your form is key. Another thing that you want to make sure when you're trying to get your form down properly and your stabilization proper, uh, or perhaps just more stable, you're trying to just get your body more stable, is increasing your muscle endurance. Now, this is very important. This is very important before you do actually any perhaps heavier or just before you're trying to build muscle, you want to make sure you have some muscle endurance ultimately. So you're actually able to undergo a very intense set and you're able to push through an intense set, right? Because you don't want to be there without no muscle endurance and then realize you can't push any weight. Now, obviously, yes, the muscle endurance is going to take time, and obviously, you're always going to keep on working at it, muscle endurance, right? Because ultimately, when you start to advance your programs more, you're going to obviously change your rep ranges up. Your rep ranges can be anywhere from 15 to 20 reps, and that is high rep. That involves a lot of endurance. So you want to make sure you're prepared for those kinds of sets, right? So you could actually push through them. But in the beginning, if you could only do, right, you want to start with lightweight, obviously, because you want to keep your form on point. But you just don't want to let your ego pretty much push you to do this heavier weight and then injure yourself right away. So take your time with it, try to build up your muscle endurance. And then after you build up your muscle endurance, then you could start really prioritizing building muscle hypertrophy. Now, in the beginning, I would prioritize both. Obviously, just dumbbells would be ideal, and fixed machines, so like a hammer strength machine, whatever it might be, because you want to work on both things, which is building muscle and just stabilizing. Those are the two constant variables you want to keep on improving upon, which is stabilizing and building muscle, right? The stabilizing part will come, well, it will get better when you're just constantly using dumbbells and free weights, ultimately. Even that could be the barbell too. But the machines you could actually really prioritize to build muscle, because ultimately you're in a fixed range of motion, right? So ultimately you don't have to worry about stabilizing the weight. The weight is going in one direction, and all you got to do is push in that one direction, push or pull. But ultimately you're being fixed in that one position, which is ideal when you're trying to build muscle. So prioritizing some machine-based exercises is going to be beneficial in the beginning, obviously, just to build up the muscle, and then over time you could shy away if you want to from machine-based, but ultimately they are very effective, and those are the things I would stick to when I'm trying to build muscle. Especially, that's what I should have stuck to in my early phase. Personally, I didn't stick enough to machine-based exercises to actually build up my muscle before I go and do a heavy set of dumbbell press, or just, I'm not used to obviously stabilizing the weight. I wasn't used to stabilizing the weight before. So that's something you should prioritize. You want to make sure you're able to make the muscle strong enough, and then obviously do the dumbbell and barbell training to, obviously train your stabilizing muscles. So, and even do unilateral exercises, stuff like that. But ultimately, obviously, this sounds all over the place, but what I would do as a first plan is just stick to the compound exercises as your first exercise, right? You want to use all your energy in a compound exercise because that's the most demanding. You're stabilizing the weight and you're trying to build muscle at the same time. So you're working a lot of the muscles in the beginning of the exercise and in those compound lifts. So ultimately, stick to those compound lifts in the beginning of your training. Now, in terms of what split I would do, You could do a full body workout, you could do push pull legs, repeat, but it all depends on how your training schedule is, and or excuse me, not your training schedule. It depends on your life, pretty much your schedule for your week, right? What can you fit in and what can't you fit in? So it's not about the split, it's what you do in the split that matters. So ultimately you have to choose a split that you'll be able to get the most results out of, and one that revolves around your lifestyle rather than making the gym just your lifestyle. So make sure you keep that in mind when you're making your split. So if you're going to do a full body exercise, or a full body routine, perhaps, what you want to do is start with the compounds and finish off with the isolation stuff. So the isolation stuff would be things like machines, stuff like that, things that are in a fixed range of motion, ideally, so that you can put all that stress on that one muscle you're trying to target, right? Another thing is you want to train with intensity, but you don't want to train with too much volume in the beginning of your lifting career or journey, perhaps, whatever you want to call it, because your body doesn't need to undergo that much stress to actually build muscle in the beginning, right? It's already a shock for it to be training, in the beginning anyways, right? You don't need to do drop sets and giant sets and partial reps, whatever it might be. You don't need to do all that. What you need to do is just do slow sets, low number of sets, and just intense sets, right? Even, yes, they're relatively intense, but they don't even have to touch failure. That's already, you don't need to do that, right? You can increase that once you become more advanced at lifting, right? So after the 6 month mark, anywhere from 6 to 8 months, I would start increasing the volume, but in a linear fashion, right? So you don't want to increase the volume, just dump a ton of volume on your training. What you want to do is just add little by little. So maybe add a drop set on this exercise, or maybe add an extra set here, add an extra rep, change the tempo, things like that. Subtle things, not drop set and then partial reps, and then no, because then you're going to get to a phase where you're just overtraining, and then it's going to be counterproductive. So in the beginning, just stick to lower volume, which that should be the priority. Stick to lower volume, which is the most important thing. And then ask yourself, what are your goals? Once you have completed all of that, you ask yourself, okay, what are my goals now, right? Obviously, you're still not going to have a complete physique at the time. You're going to still want to keep on training, right? You still want to do bodybuilding, especially if you're trying to build up your physique. But maybe you could see, okay, you have to assess it at the end. Am I training hard enough, right? If you're not training with intensity and you're just going through the motions, maybe all you need to do is just alter your mindset as you're training, right? Just tell yourself, okay, I'm going to train with more intensity. Now, there is no way to actually measure that, right? I mean, yes, you can measure with, perhaps RPE, but that's more of a subjective thing. You really need to be honest with yourself and say, okay, am I pushing myself? Another thing is you can increase the volume, but volume can be a dangerous thing, like I said, right? You need to increase it little by little, nothing crazy. And let's say even you have different goals. Let's say you say, okay, I want to prioritize more cardio. You need to figure out a way how you're going to ultimately work that around your bodybuilding training, right? So it all depends on your goals. You need to work goal after goal after goal, just one at a time, though. You don't want to, have multiple goals that are just conflicting with each other. So one at a time, and, you'll be able to find your way much better that way when everything is one at a time. But ultimately, what you need to get out of this is just eat healthy, right? Eat healthy. Train with low volume but intense, and make sure that you're not, make sure you're consistent, right? It's better to have consistent days than just, you know, go to the gym one week and then take another week off. You can't be that way, right? You can't be consistently inconsistent. So you need to make sure that you're being as consistent as you possibly can do. So that's one thing. Those are the 3 points that you should leave with after you watch this video, which is low volume, right? No need to destroy your body right off the get-go. Proper form, all this kind of stuff. Make sure you're hitting the muscle properly, eat right, and consistency. With those 3 things, you're already going to achieve the physique that you want within that 6 to 8 month time frame, even 6 to a year, 6 months to a year, perhaps. So, yeah, just make sure you keep those 3 things in check. Another thing is, obviously, with the nutrition, just to go a little bit more in depth, when you start out with nutrition, because nutrition can be a tricky thing, just eat healthy, right? Eat healthy, eat very low processed foods, right? Just tell yourself, okay, you just need to get accustomed to it. That's what you need to do, and then you'll know what's healthy and what isn't healthy, what makes you feel good and what doesn't make you feel good. Make sure your protein is high. You're just getting a balance of each macronutrient ultimately at the end of the day. And you don't need to track calories in the beginning. Just eat healthy, right? You just want to have a high protein diet and make sure you're eating relatively healthy. Once you get to the point after that 6-month period, okay, like I need to track calories now, the way I would do that is just after perhaps just track the calories you have every day consistently, and hopefully the food that you have is consistent, right? So it's easier to track. And then based off of that, even if it's not super consistent, but rather, if the calories are relatively the same but not exactly, what you could do is just add up all those calories, right? Let's say you track it over a 7-day period. Add all those days up and then divide it by 7, and then your average amount of calories. And then stick to that calorie goal to maintain your weight. And then you could judge, okay, whether I want to gain weight, lose weight. So ultimately, this video is just to show you how to get started, pretty much, right? The goal is, a lot of people have a hard time taking the first step. And usually when people take the first step, they do the wrong thing. They go into the gym, they ego lift, and they already get themselves injured. They build up muscle imbalances. So prioritizing form, stabilization, basic routines, such as just, sticking the dumbbell exercises and doing some machine-based exercises to isolate the muscle. Those are the important components of building a great physique. And it will get you started on the right path, right? Obviously, you could test around some stuff in the beginning. That's how I learned, ultimately, trial and error. And those are the things I really picked up, is form, volume, low volume, being able to stabilize the weight, consistency, and eating right. Those are the things you got to walk away with from this video. So ultimately, make sure that you just follow those steps if you're a beginner in the gym, and don't overcomplicate it. I know it sounds super overcomplicated, right? Because there's really no way to simplify it, but ultimately it's a marathon. Like I said, you need to look at this as phases. So just to break it down one more time, the first phase is form and stabilization, right? And within the form and stabilization phase, obviously you want to focus on just basic exercises, basic stabilizing exercises, nothing too advanced or nothing too dynamic, and just getting your form right on the compound exercises. And then once you get past that phase, you could start doing a legit routine, bodybuilding routine. And after you get to that phase 2, which is the bodybuilding routine, You know, you could focus on things like muscle endurance, stuff like that in the beginning. Muscle endurance, building your endurance up. And then phase 3 would be the muscle hypertrophy phase, which is building muscle. And that's it. That's it. You got to look at this as 3 phases. And obviously the eating and stuff like that, that's you're going to do that all the way from the beginning. Just all you got to do is eat healthy. Try to eat healthy and try to eat stuff that's not extremely processed. So, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope you guys learned a thing or two about what I would do or what you would do in that 6-month period, or how I would go about it if I were to restart those 6 months again. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you liked it, drop a like, and I'll see you guys in the next one. And make sure you subscribe.